Howdy, welcome here. We are going to be starting kind of a multi-tutorial lesson. The ultimate goal and our reference is the Beatles Yellow Submarine. We're going to be trying to make this in 3D, and then we are going. So we're not going to be doing all the really technical stuff, but we're going to be making a rudder, a propeller, the periscope on top, and then actually animating a video. So our goal is making something like this video here, where it's coming into the scene, it's turning and going away. And you'll notice that as it's doing that, there's things that are rotating, the periscope's rotating, the propeller and the rudder's turning. So we'll be animating that video, and that'll again take multiple tutorials, but we're just going to show you kind of how to get there. Another reminder is if you are in my class, I may have a website at this point in time. It might look something like this. The reference image is linked right here, so you can find that reference image and save it into your student drive, wherever that happens to be, so we can actually start modeling this thing. Okay, so that's kind of where we're starting, and so let's go ahead and do it. Another reminder for you would be the following, would be that I also have linked on this slide here shortcuts and general help, and if you open that up, it looks like a PDF. In fact, the first thing we're going to be looking at, if you have that open, and you're going to want to because you're probably going to miss these steps, is going to be the multiple stepped process of actually bringing in that reference image and making sure I can't select it, that it's in the right view, all these types of things, in the right angle, etc. So you might want to have a peek at this while we're working. I'm going to be talking you through this when we get started right now. Okay, so I've got Blender open. We had a tutorial about rotating all of the different things and a variety of things that were going on, the manipulators, general shortcuts, and views, etc. So let's jump into it. So the first thing you want to do is, while you've got Blender open, you can delete the basic cube shape. Okay, if you did any work previously, you can just delete it. So we've got the Blender user interface open. The next thing we're going to do is grab and drag. So wherever your yellow submarine image is, actually before we do that, so don't drag it in. Before we do that, if you look at the steps here, it says you first of all want to go to the right orthographic view. We don't want it to be in a perspective view. So if you press on your keyboard in the number pad, if you press the number 3 on your number pad, it'll get you to the right orthographic view. Okay, next step is you're going to drag the yellow submarine image into that view. Okay, the next step, and again you can read this, is we want to center the image. We're going to press Alt G. So if we go into Blender now and we press Alt G, when we have that image selected, it'll center it on our screens. And the next thing we want to do is just make it so it's kind of see-through, so when we're working on it we can kind of see through the object, and then make sure that it's unselectable and all those sorts of things. So in order to do that, and again, something you'll learn in tutorial lessons is following step by step, and if you miss a miniature step, sometimes it can get pretty ugly here. So what we want to do to reduce the transparency is we have to go to the Object Data tab, which is this one right here. It kind of looks like a mountain in the background, and we want to first of all click on Use Alpha. So select Use Alpha, and we're going to reduce our transparency. So you can just click and drag on the transparency, drag to the left or right. We're going to drag to the left, make it roughly 0.4. Okay, so it's a little bit see-through. So that's how to do that. The next, we also want to deselect. So right here where it says Display Perspective, you want to deselect that. We only want to see this in the orthographic view. It'll just give us a true view. So let's just make sure it's not displayed in the perspective. The next thing we want to do is make sure that we can't select and move it, because right now we could theoretically move it. So in order to do that, what we're going to do, so here's what it says, we're going to make the image unselectable. So I'm going to follow these steps that are written right here. It says select the Object tab. So the Object tab is this orange one right here. Next, what we want to do is open the Visibility menu. So there's a drop-down menu here for Visibility. We are going to deselect two things. We want to make it unselectable, so we want to deselect selectable, and we also want to deselect show in renders, so that when we do actually go to render this video, it's not showing in the background. Okay, so there we go. So now we've got this. We can't accidentally select it. It's partly see-through, and now we're good to go. All right, so where we're going to start is actually making kind of the hull of the submarine. A couple things you'll notice is if you accidentally rotate this, so I rotated this into user perspective, that image disappears, and that's actually a good thing. We only want to be able to see it from orthographic views and direct angles. So if I press the numpad 3, so if at any point in time you're kind of lost in space here, if you press the 3 on the numpad, it'll bring it back in your reference image, or Control 3, which I wouldn't do, but Control 3 will show you the left view, so it kind of flips it around. And those are kind of the two views that you're generally going to be working in, but generally just the right orthographic view will be the way to go. So we're going to first of all bring in a circle, and you're going to notice because the hull shape's a circle, we're going to start kind of extruding it out, and that word might mean nothing to you right now. So for now, click on Add. We're going to add a circle, so go to Mesh and Circle, and what you need to know is when you add an object, you get some properties about that object right here. Okay, and if you don't edit them right away, you can't do a ton of 3D modeling work and then edit. You need to edit some parameters about it right away. So I'm going to click on the Add Circle menu and make sure in this case we want our vertices on our submarine to just have 20 vertices. Okay. The other thing we want to do, so you can see right here that our circle is going horizontally. We want it to be vertical so we can start extruding this. So what we're going to do is actually for rotation in X, we're going to type in 90. Okay. If you happen to miss that part of it, you can actually rotate inside this object data, and you can have X rotation 90 degrees right there if you'd want to. But I did it initially. So we should have a vertical orange line. And if I rotate off axis, I'll just show you. So I've got a 20 verticed circle, okay? And it's just out in space here. All right, so the next step, I'm just going to go back to my orthographic view. I'm going to select the circle, and first thing I would do is be aware of some shortcuts or other things. We're going to move it, first of all, down roughly here. But what you can see is that it's too high. We want it basically just to go right up to here. This line right here, we want to make just the main hull of the submarine and right to here. So it's too big of a circle. So another keyboard shortcut that you need to be aware of is, and the ones that we're going to be using quite frequently here in the next little bit, are the edit mode shortcuts. Okay, so things like when I say B or box select, you can type the letter B, or select all, or grab, or scale, or extrude. These are keyboard shortcuts, BAGSE, that are going to be used frequently as we start extruding the hull. Okay, so you can imagine the first thing we want to do is actually scale, because it's too large. We want to scale it smaller. So if I press the letter S on my keyboard for scale, get this little arrow. And if I drag my mouse towards the center of the circle, it scales it smaller or larger. Okay, so I want to scale it, and you might not be able to line it up perfectly. So you can see here, it's a little bit too high and a little bit too high in both cases. So if I, the process, again, is when you are doing the scale or extrude or grab, when you click your mouse again, so the first time it goes into that mode, when you click it again, it goes out of that mode. So if I click my mouse now, and I'm like, okay, yeah, that's done, then I go outside of that mode. So the next thing we want to do is move it again. So use your move tool and move it down to where you want it to be. Another keyboard shortcut is the letter G for grab. So if I press G, I could also, so you can see here, it kind of grabs it and I can move it on the screen. That's kind of a freewheeling grab. So if I do that, I can just kind of place it so that it's at the top and bottom of the hull. So I now have it the right size. I scaled it down and I placed it so that it's along the hull. Okay. Now we're going to have to go into edit mode. We won't be able to kind of extrude this hull out unless we go into edit mode. So if you remember the keyboard shortcut, it is tab. So you shouldn't have to go up here. If I press the tab button on my keyboard, it gets into edit mode. Okay? So the next thing you want to do, if nothing's selected, so you can see you might have black dots. Okay, those are black dots. If nothing's selected, you can press A to select all, or in the future what we're going to be doing is pressing B for box select and dragging over those vertices, but that will select all of them. Now a danger. So here's something you're noticing on my screen. Okay, when I selected them and did a box select, it only selected half, and I'll show you the danger that we'll run into in that scenario. Okay, so I'm going to press A for selecting all, so now they're all selected, whereas if you had just done a box select, let me just show you, it only selects half of them. I'll show you how to fix that later on. So we're going to select them all, press A, and then what we're going to start doing is a process of the following. I'm going to do this pretty quickly. You're going to want to pause frequently and do a variety of things here, but what we're going to do pretty often here is a process of grabbing, scaling, and extruding in no particular order. Okay, and another thing, actually I'll point that out later. So what we're going to do right now is press the letter E. So when I press the letter E, what I can do is grab those vertices outwards. Okay, it leaves vertices there and extrudes new ones. This is called extrude. When I click my mouse, it'll stop extruding. I don't want to go too far, so I'm just going to stop right here. Boom. Okay, and I'm done that extruding. Now what we want to do is actually go to wireframe. The reason that if we use the box select mode, so if I use box select, what you'll notice, so here, that I'm only selecting half of them. So if I extrude, and this is very common, students think they're doing it properly, and then they rotate and they're like, oh, I'm only extruding half of them. So to avoid that with your box select, so I'm just going to undo that. To avoid that with your box select, we could make this wireframe instead of solid. Okay, and the keyboard shortcut for that one is, let me just find it for you here. So wireframe solid is Shift Z. So if we press Shift Z, now it's wireframe. So if we do a box select, you'll now when you cover it, we'll select all of those. Okay, so you want to make sure you're in wireframe view. All right, so that's just a mini lesson. So if yours are still selected, you're good to go. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to extrude again. So press E, drag it out a bit. You can see now it's too large, so I'm going to click my mouse to unselect extrude. Now I'm going to press S for scale. So S, I'm going to drag in to make it smaller in scale. Okay, and this is more of an art than a science. So I'm going to click my mouse to stop my scaling. Then I'm going to press G because you see it's too high up here and too high up here. So if I press G, I can kind of grab all those vertices and move them to where I want them. Okay, so I'm going to, and again, it's just a process of extruding, scaling, and grabbing, and not in necessarily any order. I'm going to extrude a little bit. I'm going to scale down. Okay, and click my mouse. I'm going to press G now for grab, and I'm going to grab these downwards. Click my mouse to undo my grab. Now I'm going to extrude again. This one you can extrude pretty far, you can see, because it kind of looks like a angle that goes pretty consistently to this point. So I'm going to scale it down, and I'm going to grab it. Okay, and if you make mistakes, you can always undo. You can go backwards. Something that you're going to learn is pressing Control Z to go backwards pretty often. So I'm going to go about this far out. I'm going to scale it down. And you can always, with your grab tool, if you want to, you can kind of grab it and push it back to where you want it to go. So I want it right there. And often, you're going to want to rotate often to see if it actually looks like you think it does. So this will be a frustrating process. When you start this, it's not easy, okay? So I'm going to go back to my orthographic view, and I'm just going to keep extruding to the front, and then we'll stop this video for that point in time and just continue next time. Okay, so I'm going to grab these, actually extrude, not grab. So extrude them out, scale, and if I want to, grab it and pull it to where I want it to be. Okay, and you can always rescale them if you want to before you extrude or whatever you want to do. That part's up to you. Once you get the process of pressing the letter, clicking your mouse to end it, then you'll start getting much more confident, okay? A mistake that some students make, I'll just kind of show you what some students do in some cases, is if they do the following. Sometimes students, when they extrude, and I don't know how it exactly happens, they get kind of this going on here. It's because they have multiple vertices that are extruding kind of in a weird way. You would just undo that until you got to a previous step when it was going well, okay? And not worry too much about how it happened. You just want to go backwards in steps to make sure it's going decently well, okay? So we're just going to close it up right here. So we're just going to make it about this small, and we'll show you in a future video kind of how to close the nose. So don't worry about the nose being open at this point in time. So we're going to stop right there for the time being.